Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 91 of the Primetime Rundown, presented to you by Black Cats NYC right here on the Eastern Observer, alongside my man Mike Szabo, Joey Jarzynka on hand with you for another edition of the Primetime Rundown. Our good friend Ian Schraier is on extended assignment still, so we hope that he does get back in a decent amount of time in the next couple of weeks, but we do wish him well on that extended assignment. Mike, good to see you again, sir. How are things with you?
Doing really well. And then we have a great show on tap, very loaded, a lot of good guests. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be tons of fun here in the next couple of hours. We're going to start off with our good friend Josh Adams from College Hoops Digest, not talking about college basketball here this evening, but we will be talking about his favorite team, as he is a diehard fan of the Baltimore Orioles, who are winners of 8 straight and 9 of their last 10. Talk about fantastic stuff there by the O's down in Camden Yards, who hold about a 9 or 10 game advantage, over 500 rather, down in the friendly confines of Baltimore. Crazy stuff there, Mike. And of course, around the 8 o'clock hour, the top of the hour, it will be the deputy editor of Eyes on the Prize for SB Nation's Montreal Canadiens, Jared Book, will be returning to talk about what happened with Montreal during the draft. They were hosting the NHL draft last Thursday, and they made a couple of surprises when it came to who they selected during the draft. Ladies and gentlemen, our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Be sure to download their newest album called Free Cake, which is out now. Play loud on the following music platforms: Apple Music, Deezer, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, and Spotify. And of course, today is Doubleheader Tuesday. So for those that were watching the Essential Wrestling podcast with Ryan Joy substituting as the host for our good friend Al Carl, who is on an anniversary cruise. Thank you so much to Ryan and the entire crew for watching EWP and also for hosting that show as well and keeping it going for episode 109. Here on the Primetime Rundown, powered by StreamYard, today is Doubleheader Tuesday. We've got one more later on in the month of August. So, Mike, let's get things going here. And of course, we've got a fun-filled episode, as you brought up. We're going to start off with the AllStar Game for Major League Baseball. Of course, all of the players who will be participating have been revealed on Sunday night. There's a lot of starters, there's a lot of reserves, and there are some injury updates as well, plus many more in the hockey world, baseball world, and of course, the football world. We are getting awfully close to that time, Mike, and it is only July 12th, but football is coming awfully quick. But let's get things started with the All-Star Game, Mike, shall we? And I think the first thing that we have to go with is, of course, the American League for the starters. So we don't have a graphic of who was named starters, but we can tell you, we'll keep it local for now. And of course, we knew Aaron Judge, we knew Giancarlo Stanton, the two outfielders, left and right, respectively. And then you also have the other starters: Alejandro Kirk from Toronto, Vlad Guerrero from Toronto, Jose Altuve, Rafi Devers, who has not played in the last few games due to a back injury, Timmy Anderson, of course, Mike Trout, the starting center fielder, Shohei Ohtani, and then that legacy selection as well. We heard about that legacy selection that no one even knew that was a part of this year's All-Star Game and beyond. But Mike, we did hear that the commissioner in Rob Manfred did kind of sneak that in there, and he is able to pick out just a couple, one obviously from each league. And for the American League, he chose Miguel Cabrera, and in the National League, he chose Albert Pujols, obviously in his final season. But what do you think about those legacy picks? I mean, I personally think it's completely unnecessary.
Yeah, you have enough participants in the game to begin with. You want to center the whole premise of it. The model they want to use is to center it around fan voting, which we can all have a debate around that. But then you have that model, and then all of a sudden the commissioner will decide, hey, let's throw these two guys in there. I get there's a lot of nostalgia related to Albert Pujols, so people want to put him in there since it's his last season, a legendary career, all that sort of stuff. But I think it's unnecessary, enough with the fantastic star-studded cast that we're going to have on both sides to begin with.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And then you look at some of the reserves as well, Mike, and to no surprise, of course, Jose Trevino from the Yankees, Luis Arias from Minnesota, Andres Jimenez, the reserve second baseman from the Cleveland Guardians, the third baseman, Jose Ramirez, Xander Bogaerts, from Boston, Byron Buxton, Kyle Tucker, George Springer, Andrew Benintendi, the 4 outfielders. And also, of course, there was a 5th outfielder named to the list, and Julio Rodriguez from Seattle. We'll be getting more into him later on in the broadcast. Yordan Alvarez was selected, but he is out. JD Martinez will be the replacement. They were selected today. And then, of course, the pitchers, Shane McClanahan from Tampa Bay, Justin Verlander, Houston, Alek Manoah from Toronto, which is a very good story, Nestor Cortez, Garrett Cole, both from the Yankees, Shohei Ohtani, the first time in a very long time, obviously last few years since he's been in the league, the two-way player can pitch and also hit. Paul Blackburn, the lone Oakland Athletic, who will be heading to the All-Star game. Martin Perez, the lone Texas Ranger, heading to the All-Star game. And Framber Valdez from Houston, and the relief pitchers, Clay Holmes from the Yankees, Emmanuel Clase from Cleveland, and Jorge Lopez, which is another fantastic story. We'll be getting into him. And then also Gregory Soto from Detroit. Those 4 are the relief pitchers. Mike, when we look at some of these players and we say to ourselves, there are snubs. There are guys that did not really deserve a chance to, participate in this year's 92nd All-Star game. Is there someone here that the names that we've read that potentially are not deserving of this All-Star award?
I think the selections have been pretty on par. I think guys who are snubbed, there's not you're going to pull out as the starters either. So I think it's more of a question on the National League side that guys got snubbed or whatnot, or snuffed between the pack. But I think in the American League, it's pretty fair enough. There's always going to be 1 or 2 guys you probably feel that should have got in, but I think it was a pretty good selection overall on the American League side.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at some of these players, and especially for the Yankees too, Jose Trevino, first-time All-Star selection, Nestor Cortez, first-time All-Star selection, Clay Holmes, who's a first-timer as well. He pretty much stole the closing role out of the hands of Aroldis Chapman, who looked really bad on Sunday in a 6th inning appearance. He gave up a bases clearing double to Alex Verdugo that pretty much put the game out of reach, and it was not a good sight to see. But Clay Holmes has been pretty much lights out, and if we want to really talk about a snub, obviously there's so many starting pitchers, so many relief pitchers that have the capability of really becoming an all-star here. But, Michael King from the Yankees, again, trying not to show my bias, but he could have been and probably should have been in there. But again, when you have to get a couple of guys from the other teams that simply were not deserving of an all-star berth, you had no choice but to leave some of these guys off the roster. But who knows if they don't play, if some of the guys with the lone, they're representing their team, the lone player to represent their team rather, they might, change their minds. Is there a snub in the American League that you thought of, Mike, that, should have made it?
No, not really. I know you mentioned Michael King, but I think we mentioned how they're the strong relief pitchers already there. I think in general, it was a pretty good selection, which you rarely say about all-star selections overall. I think the catcher position was perfect. The American League catching position in the American League hasn't been supremely deep, but Alejandro Kirk has absolutely broken out for the Blue Jays this year. Jose Trevino on the Yankees is perfect as the reserve. He's done really well, especially defensively in the first half. Sort of cooled off a little bit lately, but in the first half sort of came on and really came in with some big Yankees. But too deep of a position, yeah. And you have a lot of good cast all around.
Yeah. Well, for those that are watching us here, I don't know if it's only my side, but Mike is a little bit staticky, so we hope that does get fixed later on in the show. at some point. We know that there is severe weather coming into the New York region, so hopefully that does not happen on our side or whatever the case may be. But we just want to let all of our viewers and listeners know if there's anything delayed or anything along those lines. Could even be myself too, but on this side, we don't really see anything different here as of right now, of course. Let's look at the National League starters, will we? Or shall we rather? Wilson Contreras from the Chicago Cubs gets the start behind the plate. Paul Goldschmidt from the Cardinals. Jazz Chisholm from Miami. Manny Machado from San Diego. Trey Turner from the Dodgers. Ronald Acuna from Atlanta. Jock Peterson from San Francisco, which is another fantastic story for those that do not know about Peterson's pretty much journey throughout all of Major League Baseball after he left the Dodgers. Mookie Betts, Bryce Harper, who was replaced by Garrett Cooper of Miami. And then, of course, the legacy selection, Albert Pujols there. When you hear about Jock Peterson, Mike, the first thing a lot of folks might think of is that, wow, there was a time when he was on the LA Dodgers a long time ago, and then he worked all the way around the league. He was in Chicago. He was in Atlanta. He pretty much fell out of sorts, and now he's got a starting job in the All-Star game, which, again, it's an exhibition game. It doesn't mean much because it's all fan votes. But the bottom line here, though, is that when you have a ton of decent players on this San Francisco Giants roster, you say to yourself, Jock Peterson, we can't believe he's still in the league. He's and don't get me wrong, he's doing absolutely fantastic in San Francisco. But talk about a resurgence for this man who pretty much lost his job out in center field when Cody Bellinger was on his way up. And then they couldn't figure things out in right field when they moved Yasiel Puig away. And now Peterson is pretty much the star up in the Bay Area.
Yeah, he's really been the journeyman, sort of the every year when we approach the trade deadline, the quintessential trade deadline pickup for any of the contenders. Of course, part of Atlanta the last couple years. Really been moving around to most of the contenders, trying to be the hitter that helps get them over the hump and win a championship. So that's really been the main reason he's been moving around. But it looks like he's a little bit more settled here with San Francisco, although the team overall is not really in the best shape. They've really fallen out of it in the National League West. So will there be a conversation in the next couple of weeks of whether he becomes yet another quintessential trade deadline acquisition? Is another conversation, but so far, I mean, he's really held down the job out there in San Francisco, found a home for now, and on a lesser season for San Francisco, really a little bit underperforming, really shown out and now makes it to LA.
Yeah, Mike, we'll have to have you repeat that last line there. We had you staticky there, but we'll definitely keep on moving on, and we'll get you to figure a couple of things out there. So now we look at the reserves for the National League, and you say to yourself, Travis d'Arnaud, once he left the Mets, he's been all pretty much everything that was advertised when the Mets had made that trade, the R.A. Dickey trade many years ago, and they had gotten Travis d'Arnaud, they had gotten Noah Syndergaard, they had gotten all those pieces. Simply could not work out in Queens, but has found a fantastic home down in Atlanta. The aforementioned Pete Alonso from the Mets, C.J. Cron from Colorado, Jeff McNeil from the Mets, Nolan Arenado from St. Louis, Dansby Swanson, Kyle Schwarber from Philly, Starling Marte from the Mets, who may not go in the All-Star game. We'll have to figure that out because he did get hurt a couple of days ago. Ian Happ from Chicago, who has been an absolute machine. Juan Soto, William Contreras, who is from Atlanta, will be starting in the All-Star game in for Bryce Harper at the designated hitter spot. And that'll be pretty cool. The two Contreras brothers will be in the exact same lineup to start for the National League. And of course, their manager in Brian Snitker will be the one filling out that lineup card. So pretty cool stuff there. But I think the thing that really sticks out here, Mike, is when you look and say to yourself some of these reserves, you say to yourself, Nolan Arenado, Pete Alonso, Dansby Swanson, these guys are typically starters in every single All-Star game, in every single which way, whatever you talk about. It's nuts.
Yeah, the National League has been, in terms of starters, been really deep. Paul Goldschmidt has been absolutely fantastic this year. It's really what St. Louis has expected him or wanted him to be the last couple years. Hadn't really seen that, and he's just absolutely broken out. He's shown exactly what St. Louis have been looking for him, for the player. They've been looking for him to be the last couple of years, and then some. He's on par for an MVP sort of season in the National League. A lot of guys like Pete Alonso and whatnot that could have started in that first base position. He's just been fantastic this year. It's been the position players, especially in the outfield, that's been so deep in the National League. I just don't understand how Freddie Freeman did not get into this team whatsoever. A guy who's been absolutely consistent, days off, hasn't had a guy somewhere.
Yeah, and not only that too, Mike, you also look at someone that's been very consistent. We move over to the starting pitcher spot. And someone that has been so consistent out in Los Angeles has been Tony Gonsolin, who there was some chatter that he could potentially be getting the start, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be Clayton Kershaw, which we'll be getting to that later on. So those two Dodgers are from the are a part of the or representing the starting pitchers from the Dodgers in this year's All-Star Game. Sandy Alcantara from Miami, Corbin Burns from Milwaukee, Joe Musgrove from San Diego, Max Fried from Atlanta, Luis Castillo, of course, from Cincinnati, and the aforementioned Clayton Kershaw as well. Those two players, in Gonsolin and Kershaw, I would have to say that it would be the latter to be making that start. And I would say if you're Brian Snitker, you would probably be getting a lot of flack if you don't have the generation's best pitcher going, even for one inning out in Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty simple pick. You're at home. You're choosing between a couple of Dodgers. You're at their home stadium. Like you said, one of the generation's best pitchers. It's an easy call to have him be the National League opening starter for the All-Star Game.
Yeah, well, and then, you can also make an argument, too, that Sandy Alcantara is very deserving of it because he's been quite arguably one of the league's best pitchers.
It's not even that. I mean, just when you just look at the stats of the starts that he has, the longevity, I don't think there's really a start in the last month or so where he pitches less than 7 innings. Unbelievable the production that he really up there as one of the best stars in the National League, but in MLB overall, he's just been putting together a fantastic season.
There we go. Okay, yeah. So it looks as if that again we are having some trouble with the communication from Mike. The relievers in this year's All-Star Game: Josh Hader from Milwaukee, Edwin Diaz from the Mets, Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals, David Bednar from Pittsburgh, and Joe Mantiply from Arizona. Josh Hader was out from Milwaukee, and now Carlos Rodon, who at one point was a snub, he from San Francisco, he is finally in. So that's a good thing, because the moment you see Carlos Rodon, you would say to yourself, well, he's a lock, he's in, ready to go, but he is now being replaced. This at one point, Mike, when we saw the rosters come out and Rodon not on that, what were your thoughts initially?
Yeah, that it's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, he's been a fantastic pitcher for the Giants this season. Fantastic acquisition. He's been putting together a really good first half. Mind-boggling that he wouldn't get onto the list of pitchers, given the fact that I wouldn't say, obviously you have a great collection of pitchers for the National League, but I don't think anybody's been supremely, unbelievably dominant, or you've had periods where pitchers have been hurt, whether Kershaw's had a small stretch. Walker Buehler's down pretty much for the year, so there's another name that would have been for the All-Star game already gone out. And you look at Rondon's numbers, strange that he wouldn't have been able to make the original. He didn't make the original list.
Yeah.
So thank God that got rectified.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we say to ourselves, there's a few other snubs too. There's a couple that have really been lighting it up. And we'll get to that in a few short moments, of course, with our good friend Josh Adams, who is here. Josh, good to see you, my friend. Been a long time. How are you?
Hey, Joey. Hey, Mike. Good to see you guys. Is it November? Did I miss it? Is it college basketball season? Or what am I doing here in July?
Unbelievable stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, from College Hoops Digest, Josh Adams. And as we brought up in the open, too, Josh is not only college hoops, he is all about Baltimore sports and all about the Baltimore Orioles and the Baltimore Ravens. And we cannot wait to have him on also in the latter portion of the summer, too, to talk about his Ravens. And now this is very odd. We're talking about good things with the Orioles. Are we going back in time to 2013 with Buck Showalter at the helm, or is this 2022 with Brandon Hyde leading the way with an 8-game winning streak, Josh Adams?
Well, Joey, I'm just thrilled to talk about the Orioles. I really am. I'm so excited. I told you I was down there this past weekend for the series against the Angels. There's an energy back at Camden Yards that I haven't felt since the aforementioned 2013 season. There's definitely, I'd say the big difference between maybe that era and this era that we're entering into is that the previous general manager, Dan Duquette, sort of kind of lucked into that a little bit. But this is all part of this plan that this current GM, Mike Elias, has implemented, where they tanked, and they said we're tanking for many years in order to get the high draft picks. And we're starting to see the fruits of tanking. And the energy's back at Camden Yards. It really is. It's fantastic. As a long-suffering Orioles fan for the last 40-something years, it's there very few times do I get texts about the Orioles that are good news, or requests to talk about the Orioles that's good. So fire away, guys. I'm ready. The peek behind the curtain, I usually have notes with college basketball. There's no notes here. I live and breathe the Orioles. So fire away. I'm happy to answer.
It's truly unbelievable, though, to see that, at one point, Josh, we continuously heard Trey Mancini's name potentially coming up in trade rumors. Trey Mancini's going to be the biggest, the biggest target from the Orioles. He's the biggest trade chip. But now, how in the world can not only Orioles fans, but even baseball fans look at the Orioles and say, yeah, this team is going to sell? No, they're not going to at this point. And if they keep things up, this team could potentially be buyers. How many years has it been since you've heard that Orioles are going to be buyers at the trade deadline?
Well, Joey, honestly, I think the Orioles, how bad they've been is a little exaggerated. They were a wild card team in 2017, and they won the AL East in 2016, and they were a wild card team in 2015. So it hasn't been too long. It hasn't been decades of futility, but certainly when they've stank, they've stunk. I mean, they've a string of 100+ losses the last 3 years has not been kind of an easy pill to swallow. But whether they're buyers or sellers at the All-Star break or the trade deadline is going to be interesting, because I don't know if they're ready to make that move just yet. I think one of the most intriguing things about this team, and kind of a glimpse of where they're going in the future, is their two best arms, Grayson Rodriguez and John Means, are both on the shelf for this entire year. So they're doing this without their two best pitchers. I mean, I'm not talking like they're their 3 and 4. These guys are their 1-2 starters. So the fact that they're doing this with this pitching staff and within this winning streak, their starters ERA has been 3.28. Again, no notes, 3.28.
Yeah.
And the bullpen has been lights out for the better part of this year, especially after they called up their heralded prospect, number 1 pick, Adley Rutschman. Their bullpen has been lights out since then. I believe they're something like 27 and 15 since they called up Rutschman. So it was a slow start to the year, but ever since they called up Rutschman, this team has taken on a new characteristic, and really he's while his numbers don't reflect it, the fact that you can see that the pitching staff, they know, growing up with him in the minors, that he knows how to call a game, and you can see the pitchers have settled down a lot since they brought him up.
You look at this Baltimore Orioles team, Mike and Josh, and you say to yourself, team average, they're on an 8-game winning streak. They're not really a flashy team, but they're getting it done in many ways than just one. You look at a number that really sticks out to a lot of folks and really stuck out to me. This biggest one here, Josh, their team average is 18th best in Major League Baseball, a 236. Now, in their last 7 games as a team pitching-wise, a 2.20 ERA with 3 saves and a opposing batting average of 223. As we said, they're getting it done in many ways than just one. What do you see in terms of how they're getting it done?
Well, there's a lot of maybe what we said down in Baltimore back in the heyday of Orioles magic, which is, especially on Friday night where they were down, I believe, 5-2 in the bottom of the 9th and down to their last strike.
Yep.
And they strung together a bunch of hits and they walked it off. It's victories like that. I believe the Texas series and going into that Angels series, they had 3 walk-off 9 innings in a row.
Yep.
So I mean, this is it's why kind of this team has sort of captured the imagination down there. Is that it's fun. It's fun to see your team walk off in the 9th. So there's no reason why. Whether this goes on or tonight, and they play the Cubs tonight in Wrigley, so it's going to be, they have a shot, of course, of continuing this on. And by the way, their 2 blown saves. Their one All-Star Lopez, their closer, he blew 2 saves in Minnesota, or else this would be a 10-game winning streak. I mean, they were down. The Twins were down to their final strike in those 2 games, and he gave up 2 home runs in 2 consecutive games. The only 2 blown saves he's had all year, or else this would be a 10-game winning streak. So I mean. It doesn't seem like a fluke anymore. It seems like the team sort of stringing it together. And the one player, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with up here, that I think has been the key kind of cog, and they asked John Means, they asked Mountcastle, Rougned Odor has provided the leadership there that I think that they were lacking, the veteran presence. It's funny. Means was interviewed the other day in the booth, and he said, I thought Odor was going to be one real mean SOB, and I was intimidated by him. But it turned out he's the nicest guy in the world. We love him. And I thought, he has that kind of persona ever since he, knocked out Jose Bautista on the field. But, he's the guy who just he's not going to bat, crazy, huge, numbers, but he's getting the hits when he needs to get them. He's been the catalyst, I think, in getting this team to believe in themselves.
Well, it's very funny because, were you talking about this?
Oh, yeah.
I think he was talking about this, ladies and gentlemen.
One of the best photographs of all time. Yep.
It's truly remarkable to see him do that. And wow, what a form there too, back when he was with Texas too.
Yeah.
He was with the Yankees too last year, and a lot of folks, had said, there's a lot of baggage coming in, and then he goes to Toronto, and then he goes to Toronto. How are they going to perceive him? Whatever, all that stuff. But really, and no one ever thought that he was, a leader. They just thought he was just that general infielder, general second baseman. And, now this guy is a part of this team that is finding ways to win, as you brought up the Oriole magic. But I think the best way to put it, especially in the last few games, Josh, the comeback kids seriously are striking all around the diamond. It's amazing. And I'm sure about Jorge Lopez's story too, with his kid as well, which is a really, really devastating story, which we'll get to later on. But Mike, please fire away.
Well, Josh, I think the big thing I wanted to bring up too is, among this, huge win streak that they've had, this, game under 500, going forward, how are they really going to approach the deadline? They're going to have this stretch coming up where they play the Rays 7 times, and they'll have a 3-game set against the Yankees. How will that does that really affect their mindset, or is it, an approach of with the front office that, everything from here on out is just building, and whatever else, we get in terms of wins is just extra gravy?
That's a good question, and it's one that's being tossed around a lot on Baltimore sports radio right now. And I believe that Elias, the general manager, he is so dialed into this sort of long-term plan, and he was one of the architects of the Astros. When the Astros rebuilt themselves into a World Series winning team. I mean, he was one of the main guys, and he took that philosophy here. Well, let me shut my dog up.
You're good.
One of the architects of the Astros winning the World Series. So he has this plan, and because of that, I don't think he's going to do a deal at the trade deadline. It's not going to be beneficial long term. I can honestly see them dealing Mancini. I saw that Mancini's one of the names that, on Mets Twitter, everyone's talking Trey Mancini to the Mets. And I think if the Mets offered the right package, I think Elias would deal him for a couple minor leaguers. I mean, that's just sort of the way it goes. Let's face it, guys. The AL East is just brutal. I mean, if the Orioles were in the Central or then you make your move. But the AL East, geez, I mean, everybody's with the way that division is, it's going to be interesting come late August, September, because that's when the schedule becomes heavy towards division rivalries. And while the Orioles may not make the playoffs this year, they certainly could have an impact if they keep playing the way they are because they end up with Boston and the Yankees and Tampa, I think, consecutively at the end of the year.
Yes. I think the thing, though, Josh, is that when you say to yourself that, the long-term vision and the long-term plan, obviously, is to gather and gather and gather. As an Orioles fan, though, for you, would that be difficult for you and for all of the other fans to, see that, let me rephrase, that are beginning to lose patience to deal away potentially your best player in Trey Mancini?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of faith that's been put into this sort of rebuild. Yeah. And while losing a player like Mancini, who's basically become like a civic institution in Baltimore, he's the most well-known player. He's probably the most beloved player in the organization. And honestly, as a fan, it sucks because he had to deal with like 3 years of 100+ loss seasons. And now that the team's kind of turned it around, now he gets dealt. So it's not a fair thing to Trey at all. I mean, speaking as a fan, it really is a bum deal for him. But at the same time, you got to look towards next season with Rodriguez and Means being healthy, with the Orioles have Gunnar Henderson, who jumped from 41st in prospects to the top 5 in this past year. That's an unbelievable jump. Yeah. So he's going to come into the lineup as well. So honestly, if there's a bat that's expendable there, because they're not going to move Mountcastle, they're not going to move Austin Hayes, they're not going to move Cedric Mullins. The bat that's expendable there is Trey Mancini. So if the Mets offer, or whoever, a contender this year, offer a decent package that Elias thinks is fair, they've shown that hey, we're sticking to the plan and we're gonna do what we need to do. The big question is the offseason, because now that the team has shown that they can actually, the plans come to fruition, are they going to be spenders in the offseason? And I think that's going to be the fascinating thing to watch, because they've moved the fence back 20 feet and put it up another 15 feet in order to lure free agent pitching, because they couldn't sign a pitcher to save their lives. So, they've set up all this for, I'd say, if not this year, next year they're going to make a huge push towards the AL East for sure.
Oh, well, now that is something that, again, I mean, I know in Mike's lifetime, he hasn't heard that, and he's only been born for about 5 minutes. So he has no idea. He has no idea about the 2015, 16, 17 Orioles that were actually contending. Manny Machado donning the O's uniform, things like that. Chris Davis, those years as well. I think another fantastic stat. Hold on. It looks as if that your name was not right there. We had our second guest on there. That's a mistake. Josh, you look at this record inside Camden Yards, 25-17 inside Camden Yards, 43-44. They're 2 games back in the wild card. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've won 8 straight, as we brought up. What is it about Camden Yards, especially for you as a fan, that this team is just really outperforming, especially in the, when they're down also at home, in the latter parts of the game, they're just outperforming their opponent.
Well, I really, all credit goes towards the bullpen, because the bullpen is keeping them in most of these games. All credit goes to the starters, and, attest to their good home record. I really think it's what happened with, I cannot tell you the difference that moving those fences back and then making that fence 20 feet higher in left field has made. Balls that would be 15 rows deep last year are easy outs right now. And while that's costing home runs, it's probably cost Trey Mancini and Austin Hayes a bunch of home runs. It also is keeping the ball in the ballpark. And as we all seen, when the Yankees come to town and Gleyber Torres is launching balls, 20, 30 rows every game, or Judge, it's a huge deal. Camden Yards was, I believe, last year the ballpark that had the most home runs hit in it. I believe this year is the least or the second least ballpark that had the most home runs hit in it up till now.
Wow.
It's a humongous difference. It really is. I mean, it turned in from a launching pad into a really kind of a pitcher's park now. So it makes a huge difference in confidence and also kind of the way the Orioles lineup is built. It's not a whole bunch of sluggers. It's the guys who put ball, it's a lot of contact hitters in that lineup. So that in itself, it's a genius move. Every Broadway broadcast that I've seen, they mock the erector set ballpark that the Orioles are building here. But again, the Orioles have like these NASA guys like Sega Mendenhall, like they have them looking at these analytics and say, hey, if we move this wall back just the X amount of, make this much higher, this is how many runs we're going to save. And so far, so good, because it's worked.
We should just say we should Colorado should be taking some notes and you know what, Josh, they should do? They should just remove all the seats and just have the fence go back into the parking lot and say, okay, there we go. That's exactly what they should do out there. But it seems as if at one point, for those that are not really Baltimore Orioles fanatics or even avid baseball watchers, Baltimore at the time, according to Josh too, and we can all attest, could potentially have been deemed as Colorado East, the way that the balls were going out of the ballpark. Truly that's wild, especially after, hearing Gary Thorne on Masson over and over again. Oh, he had another one. Oh, good Lord, he had another one again. Mike Szabo, go ahead. And for those folks also, Mike, we are having some technical issues with Mike, so he is delayed a couple of seconds, folks. So just want to let all of those people know. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just going back to how they're only one game under 500, such a deep division like this. How much are really the divisional games going? We mentioned about the offseason, how the divisional games are really going to affect their potential off-season plans and how they're going to want to jump up and back into the standings, or as all the national media will say, no longer be the AL East punching bag.
It's funny. The Orioles, even during these down years, have somehow always played the Yankees really tough.
Yep.
I believe they may have even had a winning record against them last year, or close to 500 against them last year. Was it 11-9 or something like that last year?
Yes.
I don't know. So I only know that because I've heard that from every Yankees fan that lives around me. so the Orioles managed to play their division very tough. Then when they go down to Tampa, it's usually a house of horrors, but it usually is for any team down there. And not just because Tampa's has the best farm system, but also playing in front of 6,000 people in a rusty old dome. I think it's a shock to everyone's system. It's such a brutal division, Mike, that I think they realize that they'll never buy their way into it the way the Yankees can. And to the Yankees' credit, a lot of their stars are homegrown, but they'll never be able to write that check that a Boston or New York could for a frontline starter or a five-tool player. So, but they've managed to be competitive in the AL East this year and in previous years. Overall record not great, but they played New York and Boston very tough. Toronto and Tampa Bay have always been their bugaboos. They cannot win in Toronto to save their lives. Can't win in Tampa to save their lives. I believe Toronto had an 8-game winning streak against them, 8 or 9 game winning streak against them coming up to this year. So, as far as New York and Boston go, they're always competitive. But again, Toronto and Tampa Bay have been tough. So I think that's going to be the real challenge down the stretch here. The way the Yankees are playing, the Yankees are a juggernaut this year. So no teams, I think, is going to be able to keep up with them. But man, the way this whole division is bunched together, I think there's not that much wiggle room between all of them. And the fact that the Orioles have a $39 million payroll as opposed to everybody else, I think speaks volumes on where the franchise is going, and the direction's trending upward. So it makes all of us happy, for sure.
It's truly remarkable because, again, when you look at some of these players like a Max Scherzer, when he's getting paid that exact, I don't think he's getting paid that exact amount, but a little bit more, I believe. That entire roster is just one player up here in Queens. It's amazing to see, again, how when you put everything together, it just shows baseball is a team sport, and they're buying in to what Hyde wants to do, and to the entire, as you brought up, to the vision of this, extended rebuild. And now, can they do whatever it may be to potentially build, I don't want to say a winning team, but I would like to say a playoff team. I think that's fair to say in the next year or two. And potentially, Josh, is it fair to say that, with their not only the experience, but also their success so far, they're one game under 500. Is it fair to say that this may have fast forwarded a rebuild?
Absolutely, Joey. And there's the rebuild is not even close to being done. Again, Grayson Rodriguez hasn't even had a start in the majors yet, the number one prospect in baseball. So he's been out with a abdominal injury for the last 2 months. He was supposed to. They were saying he was going to come up by now. DL Hall, the other pitcher they have in the minors, is just tearing it up. His last AAA start, he had 16 strikeouts, 36 swing and misses in those 16 strikeouts, which, when you think about it, is really kind of ridiculous. And Gunnar Henderson, who's a 4 in the top 5 prospects in the majors. So the rebuild is not here yet. We have all these guys still in the minors waiting for their shot. So the interesting thing is going to be, are they going to have space? Can they make space? Because Henderson plays shortstop third, so that's gonna take up a space that Arias and Mateo have. So they're one of them is gone, and then Rodriguez and Means back in the rotation with DL Hall coming up. There's 3 pitchers, and who are you going to get? Tyler Wells, who is a Rule 5 guy, who's been their best pitcher all year, 7 wins. He's got, I think, a 3.28 ERA. There's your number 4 guy right there. Dean Kramer, who pitched brilliantly Saturday in a 1-0 shutout. There's your 5th starter right there. I mean, and you got guys like Kyle Bradish, who's pitched pretty well, who's again, they brought up from the minors this year. Really, it's pitching. What's the old saying? You develop arms and you buy hitters. Is that the old is that the old saying? Because you can always buy a hitter, but you got to develop those young arms, and they have them in spades in the minors right now. So again, the rebuild, this is not a complete package here. So the fact that they're only 2 games out of the wild card and they're not even close to bringing up sort of the talent that they have, it's reason to be optimistic for sure for a deep playoff run in the very near future.
Josh, you got a chance to see on Sunday, which was an exclusive Peacock game as well in the morning, or rather actually at noon. LA and the LA Angels and Baltimore, there were 9 unanswered runs scored for Baltimore from the 4th to 6th inning. Truly amazing stuff to see where they swept the Angels. They swept the Angels. And when you look at that, and actually I'm going to give credit to our good friend Ian Schraier who brought this up as well. You know, they can't get things going. They have 2 perennial all-stars, 2 players, 1 player who's pretty much the greatest player in the world right now, and Shohei Ohtani, a fantastic 2-way player, but they simply cannot get out of their own way. And again, Baltimore is just showing what they're able to do night in and day in and night out, whatever the case may be. And they're doing it from top to bottom. There's another player here in his last 7 games. He's gone 7 for 26 ribbies and a 409 on base percentage, and his name is Ramon Urias. He's done truly amazing as well. Again, these are players that you just simply do not hear of that are absolutely raking in this in this clubhouse and for this team.
Yeah, Urias is a hell of a story. You know, he was a guy who was kind of picked off the scrap heap. I always pull for him. I went down to spring training last year, and I sat behind his wife and his two kids for 2 of the games, and they were rooting hard for him. So I was pulling for him. Yeah, he's one of those guys who will never, you know, be the cover guy in MLB The Show for sure. But you know, those are the types of guys that utility player can play a couple of different positions. You know, has had some big hits already this year. You know, those are the types of guys that will. I won't say win you the championship, but you need guys like that in your roster. You know, you need guys like Urias on your team because, you know, especially with injuries and the guy who can plug a lot of holes, like that's the type of guy I think they would love, that they would keep around for sure. And he's a heck of a story. The one thing that I give Elias a lot of credit on, and I give him a lot of credit on a lot of stuff, but he has a knack for finding guys like Urias, like Felix Bautista out of the bullpen. This is a guy who throws 101. He's become one of the best setup men in baseball. Throws 101, has a nasty splitter, you know, as his out pitch, and he's damn near been unhittable this year. Guys like that. And Tyler Wells was a Rule 5 guy, and he's their best pitcher right now. These guys have an eye. They really do for finding talent that a lot of teams pass up on. So it's a credit to the organization that they can find players like these, and they will not be superstars like maybe Rutschman will be. They're the guys that will win you a championship, you know, down the line.
Last question for Mike.
Yeah, so Josh, we alluded to the fact that for Baltimore, really maybe everything's gravy from here on out. Maybe they won't do a lot at the trade deadline. But, you know, if they do wind up doing something, you know, what's the name of who they may try and go out and get? Maybe it's going to be someone with an eye toward the future, you know, someone further down, I would assume. But is there any sort of talk really there in the Baltimore circles who they really, you know, try and look to bring toward the deadline? Yeah,
there's a guy I've seen the name that's bounced around for the Mets, and I actually saw this guy play in Brooklyn, and I think I always butcher his last name. It's Ronny Mercer, I think, is the prospect's name. He's double or triple A. I saw him play in Brooklyn a couple years ago. I think he's their 3rd or 4th best prospect, and he's a guy who, if they're going to trade for Mancini, that's the guy I would want for the stretch run because, frankly, he's an incredible shortstop. You know, he's unorthodox. Has a great bat. He's the guy I would want from the Mets if they're going to make. I'm not sure if he's ready to come up now, but if they're going to make a deal for Mancini, and they're going to build, like, that's the guy I would want. I've had my eye on that guy for a long time, and I think he's going to be a special player. And if they can pry him away from the Mets organization for Mancini, then I'd be a happy guy, because honestly, it's not a terrible thing for Mancini to go back, because I know how much he loves playing for Buck Showalter too when Buck was with the Orioles. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I see this trade happening, and if they could get a guy like Ronny Mercer, and which I'm sure once someone watches this, they'll tweet out I'm butchering his last name, but I saw him playing Brooklyn a bunch, and man, I think that kid's got a bright future in the majors.
So just for confirmation, Ronny Mauricio.
Mauricio.
Yes.
Mauricio, thank you.
Yeah, the shortstop. He is now with the Binghamton Rumble Ponies in Double A.
Yes,
that's where
he's the guy. He's the guy I want. He's the guy I want. And if they can get him for Mancini, you make that deal. You know, I don't. They have enough prospects. I don't see them getting rid of prospects at the moment now for a major leaguer. You know, I can't see them getting rid of DL Hall or Gunnar Henderson or anyone like that for an establishment for a run this year. I really don't. I think they're waiting on Means and Rodriguez to get in that rotation. So I think they'll be sellers or stand pat at the deadline. I really don't see them buying at the All-Star break.
I was going to say, and not only that too, do we remember from many, many years ago when Arizona tried going for it all, and then they traded for Shelby Miller, that went absolutely sideways, and look who Atlanta got back, Dansby Swanson.
Right.
That was a very big deal. So no, Henderson is going to stay put, because I am almost for certain. And again, I'm not a general manager. I'm just a guy behind the keyboard here.
Right.
I could tell you, if it were me, Josh, and I think every other general manager out in Major League Baseball, they have that in the back of their head. If they see someone really good. Hey, listen, Shelby Miller's career went to legit, 4-letter word in a span of 3 starts, and now Dansby Swanson, who Arizona could have or could have had or could have kept. Nope, they decided to go for it all at that point, and now you stand put and you keep on doing the rebuild way and go with that vision that you've got.
Well, the Orioles, in their long and storied history, did one of those deals, and they traded a young prospect away named Curt Schilling for Glenn Davis to the Houston Astros, and Glenn Davis was out of baseball in a couple of years, and Curt Schilling went on to a Hall of Fame career. So, you really are kind of playing with fire sometimes with those deadline deals, especially when it comes to prospects. So I hope they're wise and kind of, don't blow it. The thing that's interesting, and I know you guys, but the thing that's interesting kind of in this offseason is that the Orioles ownership right now is kind of in limbo, because Peter Angelos owns the team. His Baltimore kind of lawyer, bought the team in '93. He's sort of on his last leg, so his sons have taken over, but the one son is suing the other son right now. So there's a big. I
saw that, yeah.
Yeah. So John Angelos is the managing partner, but his brother Louis Angelos is suing him, saying that he didn't give him permission to become managing partner. So there's kind of a financial, even if they want to buy, there's sort of a financial question on whether who's actually going to write the check, because right now it's in court to figure out who actually owns the team. So again, more drama in Birdland this offseason coming up, I'm sure.
Unbelievable. What we do know is that we might see the Angelos on Judge Judy at some point, trying to battle that out.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a family of lawyers, so this thing's going to be a battle for sure, no question about it.
Josh, our last topic here, Jorge Lopez. He was named an All-Star. He said it was a dream come true, and as we brought up in just when you came on, his son Michael, 9 years old, battling a pair, ladies and gentlemen, of chronic conditions, and not one but 2. We know one, of course, which is Crohn's disease, which is very difficult on a stomach. And then there's another one that I personally did not know until I saw it, and I had to do my own research on it, was familial Mediterranean fever that he has been battling. He got a chance to see his father, Jorge, pitch in Boston last week. That was truly amazing because he's been getting constant chemotherapy, and he hasn't really been able to see his father play at all. But he gets to see him in person. And for you, Josh, as a father yourself, kind of, talk about what not only that means for this young man in Jorge to have to go through this, but also, this is a breakout year for him as well. And he gives a lot of credit for this breakout season to his 9-year-old son.
Well, not just as a dad. I had chemotherapy myself 6 years ago when I had lymphoma. So I was a 30-something person, and that put me on the floor. And so I can't imagine a kid handling that as well as he does. Lopez is a great story. They moved him to the bullpen this year. He was in the rotation last season, didn't do that hot, but towards the end of the year, sort of they were putting it together that he had the type of stuff that the back end of the bullpen probably could be effective. Hitters weren't hitting him the first time through the lineup. It was always the second or third time through that they were getting to him. So they moved him to the bullpen, and he's flourished. It's a wonderful story, and I saw the video of Brandon Hyde giving Lopez the news in front of the team, and you could see sort of tears flowing in the locker room from everybody, from Lopez, from Hyde. Austin Hayes was visibly crying. Adley Rutschman was crying. It's a heck of a story, and the team sort of rallied around Lopez, and you wish nothing but the best for him and obviously for his son. And the fact that he got to see him play in Boston is a phenomenal story. And here's hoping that the situation improves itself so you can see his dad pitch a whole lot more towards the end of the year. But it's one of the best stories in baseball, and Trey Mancini was a heck of a story too. That's a guy who also had stage 4 the Hodgkin's disease and had to go through chemotherapy as well. So there's no shortage of inspiration that this team can draw from, and you can tell how touched Lopez was to get the All-Star nod and how much it meant to his teammates that he got that. So it's really it's a great story, and here's hoping every son keeps improving, and Lopez continues on fire, because he deserved the bid. He really did. He's pitched lights out. Aside from that little blip in Minnesota, he's been a shutdown closer, and he's going to be a key cog in the upcoming playoff run. So it's great. It's good all around.
And now to kind of follow up on that, do you see him potentially getting dealt before at the deadline if he keeps it up?
It's possible, Joey. I mentioned Felix Bautista. He's got closer stuff too. This team's not shy. That they will always take the phone call. There's very few untouchables on this roster. I'd say Mountcastle, Hayes, Mullins, Means, Rodriguez, and Rutschman are the only untouchables. Everybody else, if you got some veteran time in you, and they can get a couple prospects, they're going to take your phone call. So it's a definite possibility, especially how well the whole bullpen as a whole has been doing. Yeah. If they could again keep stacking in that minor league system, that's their way forward. So he certainly could get dealt.
Yeah. Well, while we do have a couple of more minutes, Josh, we cannot thank you enough for being with us here on episode 91 of the Primetime Rundown. We still have a couple of more minutes here with you if you got some time.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So we've got another pitcher that I want to bring up here. In Dean Kramer, 5 innings of work on Saturday in a 1-0 shutout victory for the O's. 2 hits, 7 strikeouts, 3 walks, and he's been doing pretty well in his last couple of starts as well. What have you seen from this man as well, who pretty much for much of the Orioles roster, if you're not a general baseball fan, you don't know these names.
No. Either that or you play MLB The Show a lot. Like that's the only way you'll know. You'll know most of these guys. Yeah. Kramer's one of those guys you could immediately see the benefits of Adley Rutschman being called up. As soon as Rutschman was called up, you could see kind of Kramer settle down as a starter. You could tell how comfortable he was with Rutschman as his catcher. Kramer, on Saturday was phenomenal. That, as you said, the Angels lineup. Anytime you have a lineup and you have you're facing Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, you're one pitch from a ball landing, hitting the warehouse, 450 feet away.
Yep.
Kramer is the one thing Kramer has really done very well is that he'd start to get hit and he'd start to get a little wild. He'd give up a lot of walks and a lot of base runners. But especially Saturday, he had it all together and was able. He's got three really good pitches. He's a guy that probably projected will be a 4th, 5th starter in that rotation next year, maybe the 5th starter next year. Again, if you're getting that kind of game from your 5th starter, your team's going in the right direction. And I see Kramer really, possibly getting he could be a trade piece as well. Every team's looking for a young arm, and there's 2 spots. Again, there's 2 spots that are going to get filled next year. So, and there's going to be, it's an embarrassment of riches almost. They could probably deal a young arm and get a nice kind of haul back for him. So, but Kramer's been a real find, and again, all credit to Rutschman because Rutschman's been able to kind of settle him down and have him throw his pitches.
That diamond in the rough for the Baltimore Orioles. Yeah. Truly amazing stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And Josh, we cannot thank you enough for coming on to chat about your Baltimore Orioles. And again, is it November yet? It's not. So it's good to have you on here in July. We cannot thank you enough for being a part of episode 91. Truly appreciate the time, brother, and we will be in touch for sure at some point soon.
Guys, I will be happy to talk about baseball whenever with you guys. It's my passion in life is to talk, and I watch way too much Mets up here, so I'll be happy to join Mets talk at some point in time too. Be happy to do it.
I love it. Absolutely, we'll definitely keep that in mind for sure, and at some point too, we'll definitely have you on again for sure. Josh, thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you soon.
Always a pleasure, Joey. Thanks a lot, Mike. Good seeing you guys.
All right, bud.
Take care.
So, you as well. Thanks.
Yeah.
So the cool thing too now, as we wait for our next guest in Jared Book, who will be coming on shortly to chat about the Montreal Canadiens. We'll stick here with baseball talk, and Mike, there's another team out there that has been on another 8-game winning streak, and that's the Seattle Mariners. Who would have thought that the Seattle Mariners, with the roster that they've assembled, would be on an 8-game winning streak at some point? To be honest with you, I personally thought it could happen at some point.
Yeah, it really looked like they spent a lot in the offseason. You really thought they're going to make a jump in the American League West. They spent a lot in the offseason. They were sniffing around Chris Bryant. They made the big swing in the trade to get with Cincinnati to get Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez. They made some big-time moves to step up. And their pitching got a little better. They, of course, went out and got the last year's Cy Young winner and Robbie Ray as well. So it looked like they were going to really make a step up. And then for a time during this first half, it's been really murky and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, they start making a little bit of this run. They start getting back into the playoff push a little bit. So it's been a really interesting story. I think you can really point to that situation in LA where whatnot. Maybe that may have been a launch point to really inject some fire into this team and somewhat of a postseason push here, 2 games out of the wild card spot.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of these names. Julio Rodriguez, who is a center fielder, a rookie, mind you, 304 batting average in his last 15 games. He's 14 for 46 in 12 games played, 9 ribbies, 4 dingers, 3 doubles, a triple, and an OPS of 1.027. I mean, and on top of it too, He was also named as a All-Star reserve. We brought that up early on when we were talking about that about 1 hour ago. Julio Rodriguez is a fantastic story too. And keep in mind, they've got a lot of players that they made trades for. There was one, you had Jesse Winker, who we spoke about a few weeks ago, Eugenio Suarez as well, Adam Frazier, who they traded for from San Diego. Remember, he was a part of that San Diego team last year that they tried to pretty much go for it all with Frazier because he was a contact machine. And now all of a sudden he's hitting 221. He's not even in this conversation in Seattle's success in their last 8 games. He's been pretty much a no-show. And a lot of these other players, like the aforementioned Rodriguez, Robbie Ray, these guys are really putting on a show, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, and another name, Ty France, could have just as easily made the All-Star game. Is having a really good year as well, and Seattle have vaulted themselves toward potentially being sellers, even selling off some of these guys they brought in free agency this year. Where okay, they can buy and really make a strong playoff push for that wild card spot.
Well, you look back at their last 7 games in their pitching numbers. 2.37 ERA, 38 innings of work, a 253 batting average, 33 strikeouts. Their team hitting, Mike, 232 batting average in their last 7 games. So again, this is another team that is very similar to the Baltimore Orioles. They're getting it done in many different ways. The difference, though, is that they do have their ace, as opposed to the Baltimore Orioles, who, as Josh brought up, John Means, who is their de facto ace. He's on the shelf, on the IL for the entire season. And Robbie Ray, an 0.92 ERA in his last 3 games played, 19 2/3 innings of work, 8 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 home runs, and 26 strikeouts. I mean, this is a team that it looks as if that, again, this team, if you're following the Mariners, this is a buying team. And you would say to yourself that when in their right mind, the Mariners have bought. When have they bought? I think the only time they've bought in our lifetime, or in my lifetime anyway, Mike, is when they decided to go all in on that 10-year deal for Robinson Cano. We haven't seen anything that wild since then. And now I think we might see this Seattle team as buyers.
Yeah, they came so close last year to finally ending that postseason drought. They came so close, but just failed right toward the end of the season. Now there's going to be, once again, another push to finally end this ridiculously long playoff drought, finally end that skid and, show progression. The offense has really come on. We mentioned a lot of the guys, the pitching led behind Robbie Ray has been really strong, and a lot of the recent 8-game win streak, 9-1 in their last 10. It's not cheapies against bad teams. They just swept the Blue Jays. A really good team in their own right. In a 4-game set, the Mariners swept them. So a real statement of intent there, and how they're going to approach this deadline this next couple of weeks is going to be really fascinating with some of the games, divisional games they'll have on tap to get even closer in the playoff race.
And also something else too, the Blue Jays too, they're a legitimate disaster. They are a disaster, and they are on a free fall where they're not in any position to sell. They are all in on buying, if anything. They're all in on a long-term, not even a rebuild anymore. This team is no longer rebuilding. The owners, Rogers Communications, who own the team, they are all in on everything. So this team is in a real bind here. I don't know what direction they go in come the trade deadline, because they are in pretty much not only free fall, but they're in purgatory. If you think about it, they're right in that middle ground where they can't figure out whether if they're going up or down. But right now, all signs are pointing they are heading southbound, and that is not a good thing. for the Chapmans of the world. Matt Chapman, that is, of course, who they traded a lot for. Vlad Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio, the list goes on. Let's keep on rolling here. The Mariners are 45-42. They've won their last 8, 9-1 in their last 10, and 14 out of their last 16. We thank Ian Schraier for that last stat, by the way, the 14 out of 16. Crazy stuff here. We don't know, for starters. Our good friend Jared Book has been notified. We don't know where he is. Hopefully all is okay. We're still waiting on his response. But 10 minutes past the top of the hour, alongside Mike Szabo, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We'll be talking about the Montreal Canadiens with SB Nation's Eyes on the Prize deputy editing manager in Jared Book. If he does not come here tonight, we'll be talking about it either way. Because there is a lot of good hockey talk coming up on our show. Mike, the Yankees, of course, our team, but also the New York Mets, too. They're in another purgatory-type position because they can't seem to hit. We'll start off with the Mets. The Yankees are in their own issues. You know, they've only lost 2 games in their 40 games over 500, but we'll keep it at that. The Mets can't seem to hit, but they did get a crucial body back in Max Scherzer. He pitched really well yesterday. And again, the way that they looked yesterday, a 4-1 victory, they put it all together to come and win. But the problem that I have, though, is that enough to potentially get over the hump and past a team, if they were to make it to the World Series, past a team like Houston, where they lost all 4 against? They need some help.
Well, yeah, I think if the Mets, the most teams you're worried about is going to be these Braves who you're facing this week, the Dodgers, the Padres of the world and whatnot, where they're going to have to go up against really good pitching and grind these aces out in order to, win these games and beat them. I think, a lot can change with this next statement over the next, 48 hours, because they do still have 2 more games of this crucial 3-game set down in Atlanta. But
yeah,
I mean, that was a really good, strong opening victory in this series. Everything you would have wanted. I mean, that was a quintessential playoff game. Exactly how you want to play it. Your starter put together a fantastic outing, was absolutely unhittable until that, just that one blip with the Austin Riley home run in the 7th.
Yep.
And, the Mets they just grind. Maybe you had a little bit of luck along the way, but, you grinded out a couple of hits, scratched a couple of runs across, and the pitching did the rest. Matt Scherzer, Adam Ottavino, and then to Edwin Diaz finish the job. And, they were able to put it together. And, with all the talk coming into the series about, how both teams, the Braves and the Mets, are really going directions in terms of momentum, the Mets, at least for the first game of this series, put down a statement of authority that, they're not going to walk up, the Mets are going to stand their ground. They're not going to get walked over, in this division race just yet. And it's going to be a real fight. So it's really going to be intriguing how these next 2 games of the series play out. But a real strong opening victory last night and being able to get to Max Fried.
Yeah, I mean, and then you look at what Guillorme did as well. Luis Guillorme hit that home run yesterday in the 8th inning off of O'Day. And, Darren O'Day, again, he's been another one that's been having some issues as well. So, what we're seeing here from this Mets team also, they're getting it done all around. You see what Scherzer did yesterday, Mike. 7 innings of work, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts, and still, they were able to get it done. Edwin Diaz as well. He got his 19th save, 3 strikeouts. Absolutely remarkable. Remarkable what, with all of that. It's great. It's great to see that they were able to get it, back. And I think we brought this up last week too, Mike, is that if the Mets don't want to make a move for pitching, I personally don't believe they have to, because now they're about to get Jacob deGrom back. And if they get, or not even if, when they get deGrom back, they now have Scherzer back. They might need to make not even a Frankie Montas or a Luis Castillo type trade. Maybe they could make a 3 or a 4 starter type deal that won't cost them that much, and potentially put all of their trade chips into an aforementioned Trey Mancini that Josh Adams was speaking of about, because that's what we were talking about before we started the show, Mike, is at one point they led Major League Baseball in batting average, team batting average at a 265. Now they're down to a 254, which is best for 5th. Now, again, it may not seem like a lot, but when you were leading the league in team batting average and now you've dropped down to 5th in a span of 3 weeks, that's tough. And on top of it too, your division lead has shrunk from double digits to just now 3.5. It's tough. You are going to have to make a move if you're Steve Cohen and if you want to advance this season. Your thoughts, Mike, on that?
Yeah, clearly the issues have been shown recently with the Mets. I think you're spot on with the pitching point. I think if they want to go to the top line starters that are going to be there at this deadline, that's more so Cohen wanting to really put a stamp on this team and really go for it and just build a monster rotation for the stretch run and for the playoffs. But they don't really have to. I mean, their rotation fully healthy. Let's say games 1 and 2 of a playoff series, Jacob deGrom and Matt Scherzer doesn't get much better than that. And then it's really just about the confidence that manager Buck Showalter will have in the rest of the starting rotation. You'll have Chris Bassett. You have Taijuan Walker. Don't forget, you'll also have Tyler McGill coming back, who also started this year off really well. The big concern is really their bullpen. Adam Ottavino has generally been pretty well, but has generally pitched really well. But we know as Yankee fans that he last couple of days also giving up some untimely home runs that if you're in a different situation, those kind of hits are really going to be costly to them. But outside of Ottavino, you can work with him for now. His general numbers have been pretty good. Edwin Diaz has now finally grown into the player that they were expecting to trade from Seattle a couple years ago. He's grown now into that dominant closer. But there's a lot of question marks on the relievers from outside of those two. Seth Lugo has been inconsistent and whatnot the last year or so. What they, Chase and Shreve, of course, they picked up in the offseason. He's now gone. You've got a lot of inconsistency the rest of the way. They got to really go after a hitter and a bullpen pitcher here at this, or two at this trade deadline for the Mets if they want to continue to advance farther in the postseason, or solidify this division. Because let's not jump to the postseason just yet. They're in a real division fight.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, the defending World Series champs as well. And we said this too in the beginning of the year with Ian Schraier is that this team is not a lock just because they went out to get the Starling Martes of the world, the Eduardo Escobars of the world, the Marcanas of the world. That this team would just propel over the Braves. It's simply not going to happen, and it's not that easy. It could happen, but it will not be an easy just, oh yeah, we're going to move ahead of them. Not going to happen as well, not going to happen that fast. And keep in mind too, Starling Marte as well as James McCann a little bit banged up as well. So those are two players that really, Mike, we have to keep an eye out for if, God forbid, for the Mets' sake, if Starling Marte were to be out for an additional period of time or an extended period of time, that they might have to replace his bat too.
Yeah, he's been injured, early on in the season, so they've already experienced a couple of injury stints for him. Him going down in Saturday's game is quite a bit of a concern because we saw how the offense dipped earlier on in the season when, he was out for that 5-game stretch and whatnot. And of course, if James McCann is out, now that you lose some depth at the catching spot if he's out longer term. Of course, McCann has just been a black hole offensively, but you need somebody there to man catcher position. You have Tomas Nido there, you have Peter Mazaka, but You know, is that going to, create more urgency to call up Francisco Alvarez the longer that, McCann may be out?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have to see, but we'll get back to our Yankees talk in a few short moments. And we would like to welcome from the let's get Jared up in here from SB Nation's Eyes on the Prize for the Montreal, covering the Montreal Canadiens, Deputy Managing Editor Jared Boog. Jared, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you again. How are things north of the border?
Busy. It's been a crazy week between draft and free agency starting in tomorrow. So busy week, busiest week of the off season so far. And the Montreal Canadiens are doing a lot of things too. So they're keeping us busy.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Well, thanks so much for coming on here to talk about the Habs, because this is a crazy, crazy time. And of course, we'll get to the breaking news later on towards the end of our conversation. We'll be asking you a tricky question of where Johnny Gaudreau will be going later on. But sticking to the Habs, of course, Mike, we'll start with you here with a couple of questions here for Jared.
Well, yeah, Jared, we had the interesting drama at the start of all this draft and whatnot, but we had the conversation about, the number one pick. We've had all the conversations about Wainwright, all the mock drafts and whatnot. Montreal decides to go elsewhere, but then we have a picture of Shane Wright potentially, staring toward the Montreal table. So there's all the drama surrounding that as Montreal decides to have Slosky at number one overall. What do we make of Montreal? Make the right choice? What do we make of the drama giving that sort of stare?
Yeah, I mean it's great, isn't it? Like even leading up to it, the three guys really, because Logan Cooley got into it as well, all saying how they wanted to be the number one pick. It was like they were campaigning for it. I thought it was great. It's not something you usually see, because usually it's so a foregone conclusion, not just in hockey but every sport. But to have three guys who are just campaigning for it, it was a lot of fun. And look, Shane Wright staring down the table. There are two other teams that passed over him as well, right? So I think that there's obviously going to be more of a target, because he was wanting to go number one, and Montreal didn't pick him number one, but he didn't go number two, he didn't go number three either. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch, not only with Slafkovsky in Montreal, but Nemec in New Jersey and Cooley in Arizona. It's either going to look really smart or not so smart for some of the teams here. But I think if you're Seattle, you have to be happy. But I think Montreal, it was weird leading up to it, because you're looking at Montreal and you're like, they need a center. Why aren't they picking a center? And then basically right before Wright gets picked, they trade for Kirby Dach, and it kind of makes a little bit more sense with that, because obviously they thought Slafkovsky was going to be the best player anyway, but the positional need was no longer a thing, because you get Kirby Dach. So it was definitely a lot of drama. I was on the draft floor in Montreal, and it was hearing the crowd was great, and so it was definitely entertaining within the first four picks to have Montreal make some waves.
I think the big thing, though, Jared, just to go back to the draft portion of it, is that I remember a couple of years ago, I've gone to a whole bunch of drafts as a fan, but back in 2020, Montreal was supposed to have the draft, and I remember I said prior to COVID happening, I remember saying, "Oh my goodness, it's driving distance, from Long Island, we can go." And then all of a sudden COVID hits, and then Montreal's done. They do it virtual. For you, 2 years in the making, or actually 3 years in the making, how cool was it to be at the Bell Center, on the floor, in your home building, covering a National Hockey League draft again?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was my first draft that I've seen in person. So,
oh, wow.
I wasn't expecting it to be as hectic as it was. Obviously, going as a fan and working it, especially second day. The second day was an absolute whirlwind. But it's funny because the 2020 draft was the Alexis Lafreniere draft, and he had the chance of being picked first overall in Montreal, his hometown. And I kind of joked when the draft was announced, oh, Montreal can get the first overall pick. And then here we are 2 years later, and they actually do get the first overall pick. It's not Alexis Lafreniere, obviously, but it was a long time coming for the draft. And but it's funny because the Montreal media was waiting for Slafkovsky in the press conference room.
Yeah.
And then one person said they just traded Alexander Romanov. And then everyone kind of sprints to go see to the draft floor. So that's an experience of knowing where I was when that trade happened, and sprinting from the press conference room to hear Gary Bettman announce the trades was something that I'll remember for sure.
Unbelievable, and I'm sure you'll remember the immense amount of booze for Gary Bettman as well in Montreal as well. Unbelievable stuff. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. So really, Jared, just the overall, they had 11 picks in this draft, along with the move to get Kirby Dach. They drafted 3 centers. What's the overall consensus on how Montreal really approached this draft and came away with?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised at Kent Hughes going for it. Like, he wasn't playing it safe. The safe thing would have been picking Shane Wright number 1, maybe trading up from 26, making a moderate move. But I think that it showed a level of confidence in his development staff. And that's something that Montreal hasn't had in a while. It's something that he's focused on since becoming a general manager. And I think that's what sticks out for me. But obviously, when you look at the draft, they pick Slafkovsky, they pick Philip Machar at 26, who is Slafkovsky's friend since they're like 7 years old, which is a great story. And then picking Owen Beck at 33, I see him as kind of a Shane Wright light. Maybe the offense isn't as high end in terms of the potential, but I think that he is as low a floor as Shane Wright does in terms of being a middle six center. Great face-off guy. He led the OHL in face-off percentage as a rookie, which is pretty unheard of. And then you have Lane Hudson at 62, which is I think a great pick. I think anybody would have been happy with him at maybe 33 or 26, and to get him at 62, people are already raving about his ability to play defense, despite being 5'8". And then you look later on in the draft, there's a lot of what struck out for me, and talking to some of these kids, the guys who were at the draft, they're just good kids. And I think that's something that's the Canadians really focus on picking guys who play the right way, but these guys have a good head on his shoulder. Owen Beck was a Scholastic All-Star in the OHL. Vincent Rohrer has played tennis up until he was 12 years old. His dad was a professional tennis player. Really well-spoken kid. Cedric Guindon. That's the one thing that stuck out, is that these, and even Slafkovsky, the personality of these kids is something that they're drawn to, and I think that could be very interesting to look forward to the Canadians, see if they can put it all together with their new development staff. But I think right now, considering the team finished 32nd in the league, has a lot of veterans that need to be moved. There's a lot of question marks on this team. The mood is optimistic, I think, right now in Montreal.
Yeah, and something that initially before they did the, I guess, quote unquote, 3-team trade, if you will, down here on Long Island, a lot of the, let's call them optimistic, arm general managers sitting in their chairs and, trying to come up with excuses of why Alexander Romanov is just another Lou Lamoriello, bust, or, just trying to reach and trying to give up the 13th overall pick. For you, Jared, to all of our Long Island listeners and viewers, what is it about Alexander Romanov that Lou Lamoriello and the entire Islanders organization, what did they like in him? What is it that he's all about that Islanders fans will be happy about?
Yeah, I think with Romanov, and he really stepped it up under Martin St. Louis, and I think a lot of that was that the pressure was off a little bit, and also that they kind of let him skate with the puck a little bit more. It's not a strength of his game. He's not going to be a guy like Cale Makar who's just going to skate through guys and things like that. But he can move the puck. He's not just a guy who hits and stays in his own zone. He can skate. He can hit. and he can make that first pass. He's never going to be a guy who's going to put up tons of points, tons of goals, but he could probably play on a second power play unit as a third or fourth option if you need help there. But he can kill penalties. He's just a solid defenseman, and part of the reason why Montreal traded him is because of the players they have on their team. He was someone that would warrant a mid first round pick. So you have other guys on the roster that coming up, Caden Gooley, Jordan Harris, guys like that. But teams aren't necessarily going to trade picks for guys who haven't really proven themselves. But on the flip side to that is that Montreal having those guys in the pipeline made it a little bit easier to trade Romanov to the Islanders and get that Doc trade. It's really trading from a position of strength to shore up the center ice position through the Islanders pick at 13. But yeah, he's a very solid defenseman. He'll play top 4 minutes probably as soon as this year. I don't know if he'll ever be a number 2 defenseman. Maybe with the right partner he could be. But just a solid top 4 defenseman, still really young as well. So he'll be there for a long time.
Yeah, and you brought up 2 keys to pretty much what all Islanders fans have heard for a very long time, ever since Barry Trotz and now Lane Lambert have taken over, or has taken over here for the aforementioned Trotz underneath Lamoriello, is puck moving since Nick Leddy was traded, and then also who can kill penalties as well. That is a key part to what has been built here on Long Island. So it sounds like, Jared, is that Islanders fans will like Romanov, and that's definitely a good thing for Islanders fans, because they could not move the puck up to save their life last year. But that's a good thing, though, for Montreal, that they were able to get a position of strength. And that actually leads into my next question with, they got Kirby Dach, which is a nice thing from Chicago in that 13 pick swap. But, again, initially when they did not take Shane Wright, and I'm sitting here watching and I say to myself, okay, they're taking Slavkovsky and he's a winger. They struck out horrendously with Jonathan Drouin, and not because he simply couldn't play the game. He just continuously gets hurt over and over. But really, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong here, we have not seen in the Montreal system or even in the organization solid center icemen since I think I would say since really Plakanec, Galchenyuk. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Did that initially surprise you? And what have you heard from other Montreal fans as well before they made that trade for Dach?
Yeah, I mean that's really the whole thing, is that Montreal. The joke is they've been looking for a center for over 30 years. And they finally have the choice to take either Wright or Cooley, and they don't do it. But look, the advantage that Montreal has right now is that they do have Nick Suzuki, right? Yeah. Nick Suzuki is a guy who's going to be either a 1A or a 1 or a 1B or whatever you want to look at it. So anybody that comes in, whether it was Shane Wright or whether it was Logan Cooley or Kirby Dach, or now there's rumors about Pierre-Luc Dubois, which I don't see how they're going to get that done. But no matter who it is, they don't have to be a pure number 1 center, right? Because you have Nick Suzuki there. It's kind of like a Boston Bruins approach, where they have Patrice Bergeron, and then they could have a David Krejci, right? None of those 2 guys are going to be Art Ross winners or Maurice Richard winners, but having the both of them makes it, you can win with those 2 guys, right? So I think that's going to help Kirby Dach. And obviously Kirby Dach, it's kind of been a weird trajectory to him, right? Because he goes into Chicago, where he's behind Jonathan Toews, obviously, and expected to win. And then he's behind Jonathan Toews in what's now a rebuild. And it just seemed like they never can get his footing. There are injuries as well. So I think that the pressure is going to be off a little bit, because he doesn't have to be the guy in Montreal, because Nick Suzuki is the guy right now. So I think that's going to ease a little bit of the pressure. They also have guys like Jake Evans and Christian Dvorak right now. Who knows what's going to happen in a week from now, who can kind of ease the defensive burden on these guys as well. So, you can give Kirby Dach, maybe Mike Hoffman, Josh Anderson, say, hey, score some goals, don't worry about defense. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. from here, because there's still a lot of moving parts. I mean, I saw some people say that they're going to trade Doc for Dubois now, and I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but the roster as we speak right now is probably not going to be the roster in a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, when you look and you say to yourself, and you initially look at the roster, and I know I love the numbers game, and I always say to myself, all right, let's look at the cap numbers, and especially since tomorrow is the start of free agent frenzy, actually in about 3.5 hours, give or take, here on the East Coast. There's a lot of guys out there. Johnny Gaudreau, a lot of guys that, some that were not given a qualified offer, whatever the case may be. But, sticking here with Montreal and looking at, they're not obviously going to be spending. That makes no sense. They're going to be looking to, send some guys away, whatever the case may be. They only have $1 million to spend on the cap. You could be, I think, about 10% over the cap at some point, like before the season starts. But you brought up before about Christian Dvorak, who Mark Bergevin last year paid a lot for to Arizona, and he didn't really produce. But then again, they were on the downhill. This was a move that I at least thought, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong here, that could potentially put them over the top. They could potentially have that number 2 centerman. It did not work. Do you predict that Dvorak will be on the team next year, or will this be another 1 year in, 1 year out type Bergevin move that, all right, we're trying to erase everything that he did in his regime?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really bad year for Mark Bergevin. I mean, from when they got eliminated in the Stanley Cup final, I don't think he made one move that worked out. He extended the coach got fired. There's a lot of things there that just didn't work out the way the way he wanted to. But Christian Dvorak, the problem with that is that he was asked to replace both Philip Deneau and Jesper Kotkaniemi at the same time. And that's just impossible. You can maybe get by with maybe replacing one of them, but the other part of that is that Dominic Ducharme had no idea what to do with him. He was playing him with offensive wingers and then telling him to play defense, which just is a recipe for disaster. So I think that a lot of that was not him not being put in a good position. He did play better under Martin St. Louis. He finished, 4th or 5th in scoring on a team, despite being injured for a lot of it. So, a bad year, but still, I think there's a player there, and teams might see that. Can he be traded? Yeah, absolutely. He's a middle 6 center under a pretty good contract with team control. I think that'll be coveted. I don't think they'll get necessarily a 1st-round pick for him, but maybe he'll be packaged in another trade with one of the other assets they have to clear some space. So I think that Christian Dvorak is a lot better than what he put up last year. I wouldn't mind him in a middle 6 role again with this team, especially now that they have a guy like Kirby Dach to kind of ease some of the burden. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he gets traded, because I think that they want the main thing they want going forward is cap flexibility. And I don't think they'll necessarily trade picks and things like that to offload contracts. But I think that's definitely going to be a mission for Kent Hughes as we get into free agency.
Well, now, since they're kind of going into this retool, rebuild mode, keep in mind when Jeff Gorton was the general manager of the New York Rangers, he was a part of the whole, we sent out the letters, they're going to retool, they're going to rebuild type thing. 5 years had gone by. Mike Szabo knows all about it. He's a diehard Rangers fan. He knows the letter that they sent out to all the season ticket holders, and something that Rangers fans are not really used to. But now Montreal, again, it's the capital of the NHL world. There's heightened expectations every single year, and especially when they made it to the Cup final 2 years ago, or rather last year, excuse me. When they made it last year, I can only imagine, Jared, those expectations have been heightened to whatever. But now things are, again, in purgatory. They're pretty much in a retool. It's safe to say right now. They've got 2 players, one of which being Jonathan Drouin, who they have no idea what's going to happen with. And then they also acquire for Shea Weber's contract, Evgeny Dodonov, who, oddly enough, there was, he didn't accept the trade to Anaheim, and who knows if he even accepted a trade to Montreal. Who knows where he is? He could be still in Las Vegas for all we know. But, all joking aside, though, you speak about that cap flexibility. Does it matter about the cap flexibility when you've got these two guys on pretty much expiring contracts and you're not projected to go any further? Could they use those two guys, well, not Druid, but Dodonov, as potentially a trade deadline acquisition next year?
Yeah, I think that's the side of especially a guy like Dadonov, but even Drouin. I think that it's possible both can be trade deadline chips if they start the season with Montreal. I think the expectation is that Dadonov would be flipped for another pick or things like that. But I think that the issue is that they're basically playing to the cap. They have that Carey Price question, which would be a big chunk of LTIR if you can't start the season. So yeah, I think that there is some urgency to get some stuff down now. You mentioned the $1 million that they have in cap space. They still have to sign Kirby Dach and a bunch of other players, Caden Primo, stuff like that as well. So it's definitely an issue. But I do think that they have Jeff Petrie, who wants to be traded, who probably will be traded. They have Josh Anderson, who teams keep calling about. So there are some assets out there. I think the ones to watch as well, if they can get a taker for a guy like Yoel Armia or Paul Byron, those are guys that a retooling team doesn't. Maybe a guy like Byron because he has that leadership, but a guy like Armia is much more valuable to a playoff team or a team that's fighting for the playoffs in the Montreal Canadiens, especially at that price point. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think I'd be very surprised if they don't trade at least one or two veterans going forward. And as we get to the trade deadline, this is probably going to be a team that's going to be in sell mode again. So then, the expiring contracts, whether it's Dodonov or Drouin or Chris Wyden, who has 2 years on his contract, who just signed. So there's definitely some assets that look. A lot of these players went on a huge playoff run just last year. Yep. GMs love guys who played in the playoffs and had success. So a lot of these guys still have that on them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't expect that they're going to have like a huge haul for any of these guys. But at the same time, they're guys that could be coveted. Look at Arturi Lehkonen. He gets traded. He ends up winning the Stanley Cup, getting the goal to send them to the final, getting the goal to clinch the cup. So, no one would, a year ago, no one really paid attention to Arturi Lehkonen. So, there's guys in Montreal who can have that impact. But Kent Hughes is definitely going to be busy. If it's not signing players, it's going to be looking for guys who maybe don't get a John Klingberg, or don't get a Johnny Gaudreau, and maybe want a Josh Anderson or a Jeff Petrie, and that's where they can kind of slide in.
Yeah, and you brought up also about how Mark Bergevin really could not get much done last year. Jared, how is that Josh Anderson contract looking right now when you see everything and you say to yourself, my goodness, who is going to take on that massive contract?
You know what? The Josh Anderson contract isn't that bad. I think that it's solid top six money, which is what he plays. And look, Kent Hughes is getting lots of. He doesn't want to trade Josh Anderson. The reason why Josh Anderson's name is coming up is because he's coveted, and you look at a guy like that who's a big body, can skate like he's probably the fastest skater on the team. Yeah. He can score goals. He's not going to really defend too well, but he's pure offense. I think that's what kind of drew them to Slafkovsky. That he has the same kind of skill set. Maybe not the speed is at high end, and Slafkovsky is more well rounded. But Josh Anderson is coveted. Like teams are going to trade for him. If they trade Josh Anderson, it's going to be for a haul. You're looking at a first round pick or maybe a former first round pick. You're going to get good prospects. So I don't think the contract right now is a problem. Maybe in a couple of years it would be a problem. So it maybe be a good thing to get out of that contract now. But I don't think it's an issue or it's going to stop teams from trading for him because, he's a second line player and The 5.5 million or so is that's second line money. So it's not a bargain contract, but I don't think it's an anchor either. I mean, you look at some of the guys around the league. There's a lot of. They don't bring the things that Josh Anderson does. He's kind of like a unicorn a little bit in terms of what he can bring. Every team wants a guy like him. This is a team that Montreal traded, Max Domi and a pick for him. He's coming off a season where he played like 5 games and scored, 1 goal or 2 goals. So, I think that the guys like Anderson are always going to be coveted. And, I don't think the contract's a problem or going to deter any move for him.
Well, Jared, our last question for you. Nothing to do with Montreal, but we did see a little bit of a bombshell early on. Elliot Friedman reported that Johnny Gaudreau will not be returning to the Calgary Flames, and he will be testing the free agent market. So, Jared, I put you on the spot. Where does Johnny go? I think ABC pretty much says Philadelphia, New Jersey, or the dark horse, the Islanders. So I guess we can go with A or B. Where does he go?
I think New Jersey kind of sticks out there. They have a lot of cap space. They want a winger. He might not have the size that they necessarily want. There are rumors that they wanted Slafkovsky in the draft. Obviously, the size isn't there, but the whole reason why they didn't take Shane Wright is because they're set at center. They just need guys around them, so I think New Jersey is a dark horse. They have a lot of cap room. They just bought out Kokkonen or put him on waivers for the buyout, so they have a lot of cap space. I think they're going to be a player, whether it's Gaudreau, whether it's somebody else. They're going to look for a winger. I don't think they're going to go over after Evgeny Malkin, which is the other big name, but I think that Philadelphia and New Jersey are definitely two good places that are they have a lot of cap space, and the interest is there for Johnny Gaudreau. Maybe even a team like LA. I don't know what their cap situation is in front of me, but I just feel like there's a good market for a guy like him. And obviously don't rule out Calgary either. Just because a player tests the market, they might realize that the grass isn't greener on the other side either. But Gaudreau obviously maybe wants to go to the U.S. He's American, so maybe there's an issue there. So yeah, it's going to be it's going to be fun because there's a lot of names that aren't usually there. You don't usually get a Evgeny Malkin in free agency. You don't usually get a Johnny Gaudreau, guys who are in the peak of their careers hit free agency. But that's when the CBA changed the way it did with 7 years UFA. This is what they wanted. And it's rare for teams not to lock up their guys, but flat cap. So these things are happening, and it's going to be fun.
Exactly. Now, our official last question for you, just because you're up in Montreal and, Montreal fans, Toronto fans, not too, obviously not really too fond of each other, but because you cover the Habs, and obviously this has to do with only Toronto, but Toronto acquired Matt Murray, plus a couple of other picks for Ottawa to, pretty much future considerations, which is nothing back in return. This is, I would have to say, Kyle Dubas's last stand. Matt Murray has played, I think, a grand total of, 40 games or something like that in the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's been a legitimate dumpster fire north of the border since he won the 2 Stanley Cups back-to-back. Does Kyle Dubas get fired after this when they get eliminated in the first round once again?
Yeah, if they don't win in the first round, that's it. It's if you reverse the last 2 years, right? If they lose to Tampa last year and then lose to Montreal this year, he'd already be fired. So I think that he is in his last chance. I'm intrigued what they're gonna do. They fired their goalie coach. They go after Matt Murray. They have to get another goaltender, don't they? I just.
You would think.
I don't understand putting all your eggs in the Matt Murray basket, but especially when all you need is a playoff win, right? Like maybe that's why they got him. Maybe they got him just to put him in round 1, and they'll run who knows? But no, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because it doesn't seem like they got better in that category. That's for sure.
Oh, there we go. That is the answer that a lot of folks I've been talking to today have pretty much said. So great minds think alike. Jared Book. Jared, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I truly appreciate it. SB Nation's Eye on the Prize for the Montreal Canadiens, the deputy managing editor. Jared, thank you so much, and we will see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Jared Book. A really, really good conversation with Jared, talking about the Montreal Canadiens, because they are in a retool. They're in a little bit of a rebuild, but also there's other teams out there that, right now that are potentially entering that part of their last chance. And there some teams out there like the New Jersey Devils, Rob DeLuca's team, Mike, they are pretty much getting out of it. And with Johnny Gaudreau testing free agency, I'm hoping tomorrow when we are doing our instant reaction, we get a chance to talk about where he landed. And keep in mind too, he's from South Jersey. So he can either go to Philadelphia with not a lot of cap space, which we heard today that Chuck Fletcher is having a difficult time dealing James Van Riemsdyk, who's got $7 million on the cap hit with just 1 year. Does he want to attach a first round draft pick to that and completely reset the market for these dumping of contracts? I mean, he could, but then a lot of general managers will not be happy with him when they have their general manager meeting. Or does he go to New Jersey, get paid about $10 or $11 million, and go with Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes? I mean, sounds like a pretty good deal to me. If I'm Johnny Gaudreau, you're staying in your home state, or you can go to the New York Islanders. You could do that too, but I think he's going to go home with money. $9 million. I don't know. It all is definitely up in the air, Mike.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, and I just want to thank Jared. Conversation between you two. It was just good to hear the conversation. I know we've been dealing with connection issues over here, so it was a good conversation overall with you two, and really good insight on the Canadiens and how they're going to maneuver this offseason. But yeah, we got the breaking news of Gaudreau, which where he's going to go. Of course, had a great playoff with Calgary. He's a really, really good player. And I think the Devils are in a fantastic position. They got so much cap space. And as a general manager, the kind of cap space he has, $26 million or so to play with. You're in really intriguing waters as a general manager where you want to plug and play. And they can really just offer a boatload of money, for Gaudreau, however high they want to go on him, whether it's the $9 million range you're mentioning, maybe they'll go a little higher to the $11 million range. They certainly can afford it. And I would be surprised if he goes elsewhere other than New Jersey. It's interesting. What's his preference in terms of the lifestyle, where he wants to be and whatnot. But, if it's money wise, probably the Devils can give him the most amount of money, the easiest amount of flexibility there. But, maybe it's also going to be about lifestyle too, and where he's going to want to be.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And again, I'm for those folks that know, I'm an Islanders fan, but again, I live in reality. I'm not going to live in a fantasy land, especially with the Islanders, where you get crushed every single year, especially on free agent frenzy day. Where the most hype I've ever gotten was a signing of Andrew Ladd, 7-year deal worth about $35 million. And that turned out to be bupkis. And that was, pretty much the highlight of free agent frenzy if you're an Islanders fan. And, now I'm not going to be getting hype at all, because you still have to realize that Lou Lamoriello would have to trade some pieces and still would have to pay Matthew Barzal over $10 million and potentially more than Johnny Gaudreau when the time comes. And I don't know, granted, Barzal, that is a restricted free agent, arbitration eligible, but again, you want to stay on good terms, you'll probably buy out those couple of years and sign them to an 8-year deal at some point and remove all of that nonsensical talk. So with that being said, you look at Philadelphia and what they're all about, Mike. And the problem is with Philly is that they only have $3 million in cap space. They bought out Oscar Lindblom for those purposes to start with that. But now the problem is that apparently what we were talking about with Jared Book is the Chuck Fletcher possibility that there might not be a certain price tag that Chuck Fletcher wants to go down, the general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, to send Van Riemsdyk, who has a $7 million cap hit, off to a team that would have to take a sweetener in most likely a first-round draft pick to get all of that money away. And they still have guys to sign. So in my opinion, it's, I think, a no-brainer that Johnny Gaudreau would choose New Jersey. And he's not going to be in the playoffs for the next couple of years. But then again, Calgary, there have been times when he hasn't been in the playoffs either. I think if he really wanted to at least have a chance to win now, he would take the discount, go to the Islanders, but I don't expect that to happen. Again, I personally will not be getting my hopes up. So hopefully he goes to New Jersey and Rob DeLuca can dance around his apartment up in Stamford and be one happy guy. That I can tell you. Unreal stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, we have officially run out of time. And for those fans out there, I do apologize. We did not speak about the Yankees enough. We didn't speak about the Yankees at all. This is nuts. Ian Schraier would be so happy. Casey Bryant would be so happy talking about just the Mets, not even talking about our beloved New York Yankees. The bottom line here, though, is that they've only lost a grand total of 25 or 26 games throughout this entire season. And 2 of those losses came just a couple of days ago, Saturday and Sunday. Quick word on the Yankees. We can't go into too much detail, Mike, but quick word on the Yankees. They've lost 2 straight. They're up 2-0 right now against the Cincinnati Reds. And I think if they lost to the Reds, they got some big problems.
Yeah, it was a real interesting, messy weekend up in Fenway in that 4-game set. It came off 2 wins, then 2 real messy losses to finish off the series. I don't want to get overreactionary and start saying there's so many issues with this team because they are 61-25, but it was just really messy all around. The starting pitching was really off for whatever reason. Garrett Cole's the microcosm for the rest of this team, and having just really messy overall games up in Fenway where it's tight. There's a bunch of errors. The pitching doesn't have clean performances. It's never pretty. And Garrett Cole, a 6.55 ERA in his first 4 starts as a Yankee up in Fenway. He didn't get off to a good start. Rafael Devers, who's unbelievable how much he's able to get to Garrett Cole in his career. 6 home runs against Garrett Cole in his career. Jameson Taillon also has not looked good in the last month or so. So that's going to bring a concern of, should the Yankees really add to their, take a big swing and add to their rotation. There's also, been the rumors on but there's it was a real messy weekend, but at the end of the day, they did get a split with the Red Sox. The one thing I will say is discounting the Red Sox with the Yankees and that sort of stuff, and we're 14 and a half games up at this point for the Red Sox. They're with this the last couple years with Alex Cora. They stay in it. They're building their health, and now it's all about getting to the playoffs. They're okay with not being the best team in the division and building their pieces for the playoffs. They have a really good lineup, and it's interesting how the rotation is going to form when Sale, Evaldi, and then Garrett Whitlock come back from all their subsequent injuries. And the Yankees never really seem to look right at Fenway. Obviously, the Astros would scare you the most in a postseason series, but I think people discount the Red Sox a little bit too much. Not to the point where I'm scared of seeing them, but if we want to project this a couple of months out, if we had to make it a top 5 of teams who I wouldn't face, the Red Sox would probably be in the top 3.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's definitely something cause for concern at some point down the stretch. Mike, that does conclude our show. Let's get to our kudos. Mike, you start off.
I will hand it off to you, Joey. I'm all empty. I'm all blank. That up.
Okay, well, if that is the case, then my kudos will go to Duncan Keith. Retires after 17 seasons in the National Hockey League between Chicago and Edmonton, one of the best defensemen of all time in the NHL. 17 seasons, all said and done. And he will be, there is no question about it. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer in the next few years. So that does conclude our show. Let's get you some bills here to be paid. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to subscribe to our show. Every week we come to you Monday nights right here on the Eastern Observer, and that is only until August 29th. Keep that in mind. We will be going back to our normal hours on Friday, September 9th, the Friday after Labor Day. Of course, as we did say, subscribe to our show, The Primetime Rundown, by searching the exact title on the following platforms: Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Odyssey. And of course, if you are listening to us, thank you very much. Take a peek at our YouTube by searching the Eastern Observer and hitting that subscribe button wherever you may be. Also, ladies and gentlemen, please do the same for our friends at the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Be sure to follow them by searching the Eastern Observer and by searching the Essential Wrestling Podcast at all of those platforms. Also, keep in mind, too, ladies and gentlemen, July 30th at 2 p.m., the Essential Wrestling Podcast guys will be previewing the WWE SummerSlam 2022 special presented to you by ProWrestlingPick'em.com. Please put that on your calendar and hope to have everyone tuning in on that Saturday afternoon. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, today is Doubleheader Tuesday. We cannot thank you all enough for making us a part of your Doubleheader Tuesday. And for those that were watching the show prior to us, the Essential Wrestling Podcast, thank you for spending the last 4 hours with us on the Eastern Observer. Ladies and gentlemen, for Mike Szabo, our good friend Ian Schraier on extended assignment time, I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us here, as well as Jared Book and Josh Adams, for all of us here at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we will see you all next Monday night right here on the Eastern Observer for episode number 92 of the Primetime Rundown. So long, everybody.